Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I am your host, Rob Port. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking with Dustin Gawrylow. He is the chairman of a initiated measure campaign. And this is going to be a little confusing for me to describe this to you, but what they're proposing is an amendment to the state constitution to protect the portion of the Constitution dealing with initiated measures from legislative amendments. Now, currently, there are two ways in which North Dakota's Constitution can be amended. The first way is that the legislature can pass a constitutional amendment, and then that amendment goes on the next general election ballot, and if the voters approve it, then the Constitution is amended. The other way is that the voters themselves can gather signatures. If they get the requisite number of signatures, they can put a constitutional amendment on the statewide ballot. If the voters approve it, simple majority, it then becomes a part of the Constitution. So essentially what this initiated measure would say is that if the legislature tries to amend the Constitution, or only the portion of the Constitution dealing with initiated measures, then, well, the legislature is just not allowed to do that. Which is a little weird for a group of people who say that they are in favor of the power of the people, the will of the people. We believe in and we trust the people. It's a little odd to say that the people can't be trusted to vote on an amendment to the Constitution initiated by the legislature. I mean, I get it. A lot of people don't like the legislature. They feel the legislature's out of touch. A lot of people feel that way about Congress in Washington, D.C. as well. I certainly understand those feelings. Don't necessarily share them all the time, but I get it. I understand why people are cynical about that. But at the end of the day, you cannot amend the Constitution in North Dakota without a vote of the people. So what are we so afraid of? That the people aren't going to understand an amendment initiated by the legislature? And if you don't think that the people are going to understand an amendment initiated by the legislature, then why do we have the initiated measure process to begin with? I think it's a fair question. I asked Dustin that question several times. He didn't have a lot of good answers. I think he got a little frustrated with me, but it's a good interview and stay tuned for that. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about presidents. In fact, two types of presidents, university presidents and the national president. Now, we just went through a process through which Mark Kennedy, the current president of the University of North Dakota, sought and ultimately got a new job as the president of the University of Colorado. Now, he has submitted his official resignation this week. Certain members of the State Board of Higher Education feel like he had already submitted his resignation, but it's official. And we're going to start looking for a new president at the University of North Dakota. Meanwhile, the 2020 presidential race is heating up nationally, and Democrats have like 500 candidates. It's not that many. I honestly don't know how many it is. It's a lot. They have candidates coming out their ears. They have all these people who want to be president. And I'm starting to wonder if, whether we're talking about the president of a university or we're talking about the president of the United States, if sometimes the way we think about these positions, the way we've started to treat these positions, if we haven't made it almost impossible to be successful in these positions. Let's talk about the national presidency first. What I mean is we have accumulated so much power in the executive branch. We have the president making a lot of policy sort of unilaterally. I think about, for instance, the Obama administration, right? When Republicans got back control in Congress, President Obama sort of famously or infamously, I guess, depending on your point of view, said that he still has a veto pen and he could still issue executive orders. I forget what the exact quote is, but he, essentially said that he still had a lot of power as president and he was going to govern unilaterally. But the thing is executive orders are one-size-fits-all policy, right? I mean, you issue an executive order, the whole nation has to follow it. If we're going to make policy that way, policy that's not vetted, policy that's not subjected to the scrutiny of the elected representatives from all the various states, you're going to have a hard time getting consensus for that policy. You're going to have a hard time getting buy-in for that policy. I think in a lot of ways, being president of the United States, because we've given our president so much power, we've almost turned it into an impossible job, right? Our presidents wield everything from war-making power, right? War-making power that these days doesn't even really have to be invoked by Congress anymore, right? There's supposed to be a check on the president's war powers. Congress says when we go to war, and then the president executes that war as commander-in-chief. Only now, I guess the president can just kind of send in the military, and we call it a police action, or we call it a peacekeeping mission or something like that. And the president's, ordering the military to attack people and kill people and drop bombs and fire missiles and all that other good stuff. And Congress has never actually declared war or even authorized the use of military force. The president exercises those powers. The president also exercises, as we saw under the Obama administration, we saw under the Trump administration, exercises authority, issues executive orders on immigration, on pipeline construction. The list goes on and on and on, and you begin to wonder, how can any one person really do a good job of this? How can one person be successful at this? I guess success in a presidency is sort of in the eye of the beholder, but I don't know that you could really look at a lot of presidencies recently, even though, we look at our previous presidents. Barack Obama was a 2-term president. George W. Bush was a 2-term president. Bill Clinton was a 2-term president. So you start looking at that, and I guess that's successful if you get reelected, but are they successful as measured by governing? Are they successful, by prudently governing our nation? I'm not so sure you could say we are. I mean, you look, our budget is a mess. I'm not sure you could say we've been doing a good job with foreign policy in recent years. I'm not sure you could say that America's standing on the economic, the international trade arena has been all that great. You start to worry if we've turned the presidency into a job that the president can't do just simply because we're asking the president to do so much. I think we'd be a lot better off if Congress got back involved and Congress started governing again, because Congress, it doesn't seem like they really govern. But anyway, back to the presidency. I think because the presidency has become this sprawling job, now you have candidates who are trying to be all things to all people, and they're making these. I mean, even the presidential election process has become a sort of farce, right? I mean, you have candidates out there making promises that they aren't going to follow through on. I mean, they're making promises about universal health care and Medicaid for all and all these other crazy things. They're not going to follow through on them. There's no real plan to work with Congress to pass these policies. I don't even know that, outside of the primary process, I don't even really know that there's large constituencies in favor of a lot of these ideas to begin with. So you have a sort of farcical campaign process that bears more resemblance to a reality television show than it does the serious business of governing. And then it produces candidates who are stuck trying to follow through on absurd campaign promises made during an absurd process. And so, of course, they end up failing. Which brings me to the question of university presidents. Why do so many university presidents fail? We've certainly had a lot of bad luck with university system leadership here in the state of North Dakota. And I think it's sort of a microcosm of that larger problem with national presidents. Which is to say that we expect these university presidents to be so much. We spend so much time talking about how they're visionary leaders and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And then the reality is they get hired and they run in and there's all sorts of factions on campus. There's faculty factions and student factions, and then there's alumni factions and political factions, and then you have sports fans, and you have local government officials and local business interests, and somehow a university president is supposed to, be visionary and just weave all of these different interests together, and I think it becomes an impossible job. Maybe it's something that we could simplify. I don't really know what the answer to a lot of this is, other than to just change our expectations of the people doing these jobs. Change our expectations of these institutions. A lot of times we treat higher education like it's the silver bullet. Like we're just going to send all our kids to higher ed. They're going to go to college and they're going to come out on the other side responsible citizens ready to make lots and lots of money with their degrees. And you know what? It just doesn't work that way. But yet we have these unreasonable expectations of the university system. We have these unreasonable expectations of the government, right? We treat all these societal problems all the time like it's if we could just, put in place the right policy, put in place the right program, pull the right levers of government, and all of a sudden it's going to produce better outcomes for the rest of us. Now, don't get me wrong. There are real practical things that government can do to make our lives better. In some ways, things that we don't think about. I think it was interesting. I was reading a biography about Herbert Hoover, and one of his seen obviously widely as one of the worst presidents our country's ever had. But one of the big contributions he made was when he was serving in the federal government. I think even before he was president, he came up with the idea of standardizing things like weights, standardizing things like measurements. We have standards like the government keeps, like weights, and it's like, this is what a pound is, right? And then we use that to calibrate scales and everything else. I mean, before that, nobody was doing that. And so if you were a construction worker, a pound of screws in one state might be a much different thing than a pound of screws in another state. And when you're a growing country and you don't have like a standard, a standard measurement for this is what a foot is, this is what a yard is, well, it becomes a problem. If you don't have that sort of standardization. So one of the great contributions that government provided is that they standardized those things. And that was Herbert Hoover that we have. So my point is that government can do real practical things to make our lives better, to make our lives easier, to make commerce easier. But we're looking to government to solve so many problems now. And even with the federal government, we look to the president to solve all of these complicated problems that really they don't have any chance in hell of solving to begin with, but yet we're looking at them to solve them, and they're trying to make promises because they all just want to get elected, and they're making wild promises that they can't ever really fulfill on, and then we wonder why everything is so dysfunctional all the time, why nothing really works. Maybe stop looking to government to solve all the problems. Maybe stop looking to higher education to solve all the problems. Look internally. What can we do to better our lives? What can we do to better our communities? Bring that stuff local. Make that stuff personal. Stop expecting the university president or the national president or the congressman or the senator or whoever it is to solve all your problems. A different approach might be better. I think it's interesting all the time. We blame Washington, right? We look at Washington and we blame Washington for creating all these problems. And don't get me wrong, I'm as cynical about what goes on in Washington as anybody else. But we look there and we look at all those problems that they have. And I don't think we realize how many of those problems are downstream from us. How many of those problems in Washington are created by, frankly, what are contradictory expectations from you and I. I always think that the budget situation is a perfect illustration of this, because what do Americans want? Well, Americans want low taxes, and they want big government. And the politicians give us exactly that. And to finance it, they run multi-billion, hundreds of billions of dollars, sometimes trillions of dollars worth of budget deficits every year to finance it, because they're giving us exactly what we want. And we reelect them, most of them anyway, every election cycle. And who's to blame for that? Maybe not the people at the top of the government, but maybe the people at the bottom. My interview with Dustin Gawrylow up next. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Dustin Gawrylow joins me now. Dustin is a longtime, I guess, practitioner of politics. Is that the right term to use? You've been involved in this stuff for a long time, Dustin, and you're the chairman of a new ballot measure committee. You just submitted a proposed ballot measure to the Secretary of State's office to amend our state constitution. Why don't you tell us what does your measure do?
Oh, well, what our measure does is basically says that the legislature shall not have the power going forward, if passed by the people, to place anything on the ballot in the future that would amend the Article 3, powers reserved to the people, regarding the initiated measure process itself.
Why do we need this?
Well, we need this because it's been a longstanding issue of every time there is a ballot measure that legislators just don't like, they react the next session and try to make it more difficult to use the initiative measure process. If you'll recall, even back in 2013, you and I discussed a measure similar to this that we started to do, but never really got anywhere with, but that would have done basically the same thing. And, it really is, it comes down to what the word reserved means. Article 3 of the Constitution says powers reserved to the people. And if reserved means shared, then the legislature's current power is fully in that vein. But if reserved actually means reserved and can't be used by anybody else, then the legislature's ability to change these powers within Article 3 only should just not be there.
My feelings about initiated measures have evolved over time, and I don't think it's any secret. I don't like initiated measures. I think most of them are stupid. A lot of times the legislature has to act. You look at something like the medical marijuana measure was a mess in the way voters passed it. It had to be corrected by the legislature. So I don't like direct democracy. I don't like legislating at the ballot box anymore. That aside, I'm wondering what the point of this measure is, because already the legislature cannot unilaterally change the Constitution. Anything that the legislature proposes in terms of a change to the Constitution has to be ratified by the voters anyway. I'm not, for those of you who are confused, I'm not talking about state statute. That's distinct from the Constitution. The legislature passes bills all the time. They get the governor's signature and they become law. That's for statute. If the legislature wants to amend the Constitution, and that's what we're talking about here, the people have to vote on it anyway. And what you're saying essentially is the only way we can change the part of the Constitution, Article 3, which deals with the initiated measure process for amending the Constitution, the only people who can change that are the people themselves. And I'm just wondering what the point is when the people already have to ratify what the legislature does. If the legislature wants to change any part of the Constitution, the people have to vote on it and approve it. Do you not trust the people?
I trust the people. I don't trust the legislature on this issue.
Okay, but the people would have to ratify anything the legislature passes.
But the fact is, should our lawmakers, who are our representatives, be in the business of placing things on the ballot that give the citizens the ability to vote away their own rights?
Why not?
If you sign a contract that gives up your rights, it's not a valid contract.
Okay, but that's
unless you're
different.
Getting something in exchange for it.
Well, signing a contract to sell yourself into slavery is not quite the same thing as the legislature saying, "Hey, let's put some more checks and balances, or let's change around the initiated measure process for constitutional amendments." Those things aren't comparable. What's interesting to me, because the reason why I do not like the initiated measure process is because I think the voters tend to be distracted. I think the voters are easily manipulated by, big campaigns. I mean, look at the last few election cycles. We've had Marsy's laws. We've had Measure 1, where, deep-pocketed interests come in. They pay their way onto the ballot. These are not exactly volunteer efforts where, citizen activists are taking, time off from work to go out and collect signatures. They're paying people to collect signatures. They buy their way onto the ballot. And then they have these expensive marketing campaigns, which essentially drown out the opposition. And now we're stuck, for instance, with Marsy's law, which is protecting insurance companies as quote unquote victims from having to disclose information to the public. It's ridiculous. But now you trust in that process. You people like you say, well, this is, absolutely trust the people, the wisdom of the people, a very populist position. And I'm wondering, you say that up until the people are voting on a ballot measure put in front of them by the legislature, and all of a sudden the people can't be trusted with their own power?
No.
Well, that's what you're saying.
That's not at all what I'm saying.
Yes, it is.
No, and no. No, because if the people can't be trusted on various ballot measures like you've just outlined, as far as Marsy's law and ethics commission, then how can they be trusted for who they voted for the legislature in the first place. I mean, this is a circular argument that legislators themselves make. They bring up the out-of-state money issue, but they don't want to actually talk about a campaign finance side of it. There easily could be a campaign finance reform that says that, you know, if you want to bring in $1 million from California, you got to raise $1 million here. They could do that if they wanted to. They don't want to do it.
Okay. Well, let's put a pin for a moment into whether or not the initiated measure process is good, because you don't like my position. I don't like your position. That is what it is. Let's talk specifically about what you're putting on the ballot, though. Because taking how I feel about initiated measures out of it, you are saying the people are smart enough to vote on all these different ballot measures that are put in front of them by all these different, by some California billionaire or whoever, wants to put their hobby horse on the statewide ballot. They're smart enough to discern and to make decisions and all that, but not if the legislature puts an amendment to Measure 3. Now suddenly the people aren't smart enough and they shouldn't be allowed to vote on that? That seems hypocritical to me, Dustin.
Nope. Not saying that. You're putting words in my mouth.
But I'm not. That's literally what you're saying. You're saying the people cannot be allowed to vote on.
No, I'm saying the legislature should not be allowed to put
because
that
the people are too because the people are too stupid and the legislature will hoodwink them.
No, because it's a separation of powers issue.
It's not.
Article 3 of the Constitution sets the people as their own branch of government.
Okay, well that's a rather unique interpretation of it. Throughout the history of our state, since the initiated measure process was enshrined in the state constitution in the first place, the legislature has been able to make reforms to it. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to trot out a novel argument saying that the legislature can't touch this one particular part of the Constitution because if they were to put something in front of the voters to amend it, the voters might agree? Is that really what you're afraid of? Is that the voters might agree with the legislature on something?
No.
Well, then why do we need this?
Because we shouldn't have to fight the legislature every session on what powers they can take away from the people. If the powers are reserved to the people, they're reserved. Reserved means reserved. You know,
if that's what it meant, then why didn't they draft it that way from the point at which the initiated measure process was put in the state constitution? If that's what it meant,
because they didn't think that they would have to deal with a legislature that constantly was trying
or maybe
to
it's a system of checks and balances, right? Okay, so let's buy in for a moment to the idea that the people are their own branch of government. Well, every branch in the American system of government, every branch has checks and balances built in, right? The executive branch can do certain things, but the legislature has to sign off. The legislature can do certain things, but the executive branch has to sign off. You have the judicial branch sort of playing referee, and they have their own powers. Well, why no checks and balances on the power of the people then?
There is. Nothing here says that legislators, as citizens of North Dakota, cannot do a petition just like we are doing. We are leveling the playing field.
Okay, but we're not talking about we're talking about the power of the legislature, not the legislators individually as citizens.
But the thing is, you're acting like they can't make the drastic changes that they want to make. All we're doing is taking away their shortcut. We're not taking away their ability to do it as citizens.
Taking away their shortcut. You're taking away their ability to exercise their power as legislators. And first of all, I mean, do you think that's going to pass
on one issue? Okay, on one issue.
I have a problem worrying that this could turn into a protracted legal battle on a separation of powers issue, because you're essentially carving out a portion of the law and saying the lawmakers can't touch that portion of the law. It's sort of like the legislature passing a law and then saying no future legislature can ever change that. That's ridiculous.
But the Constitution can be changed. If somebody wants to change it, they can do the work.
Okay.
If somebody wants to collect 30,000 signatures and eliminate the entire Article 3, they can do it if they want it. Well, then there's nothing stopping them.
Then let me turn that around on you. If you don't like something that the legislature puts on the ballot in terms of amending the initiated measure process, then you can do the work and you can block it. You can stop it.
Yeah.
The people will have a vote on it. The legislature can't do anything to the Constitution without the people voting on it. That's the status quo.
Yeah, if the legislature wants to give itself a veto, then why not let the people have an opportunity to take away the legislature's power to give themselves vetoes? I mean, that is a check and balance. You're actually,
Now you're talking in circles, because what you're referring to is the legislature has put on the ballot a constitutional amendment that would essentially, if the people, this is also complex, but essentially what it would do is if the people pass an amendment to the Constitution, would go to the legislature would say yay or nay. If the legislature says nay, it goes back to a second vote of the people. I like that. I don't think any branch of government, if we're going to treat the electorate as a branch of government, I don't think any branch of government should be without checks and balances. So I like the idea of, if we're going to amend the Constitution, it should be more than just a 50+1 majority at the ballot box. It should be a lengthier process. I like what the legislature's doing. You're using that, and you're ticked off, and you're in some populist peak, and you're saying, well, now we're going to punish the legislature by taking away their ability to amend this one part of the Constitution, which they can't even do unilaterally anyway.
Right, and if their measure passes and our measure passes, that will probably be the end of all changes to this article, and that might be a good thing for North Dakota.
Well, this seems unnecessary to me, and it seems like if you're going to go around saying, well, we trust the people and the people can make these decisions, I don't understand why you're saying, except we don't trust the people when it comes to the legislature proposing changes to the initiated measure process. Now we don't trust the people to vote on that.
Nobody's saying that.
Okay, except you don't want them to vote on that.
It's not that they shouldn't be able to vote on it. It's that the legislature should not have the shortcut to put it in front of the people when it is
because the people might say yes
regarding the powers.
Because you're afraid the people you're afraid the voters might vote something you don't like. I mean, that's what it is. You're afraid of putting it in front of the voters because the voters might say something on it you don't like.
The issue is the arrogance of the legislature to believe that they know better than the voters and to put things on the ballot that will restrict the people's ability to have their own check and balance on the legislature. This is, the Article 3 is a check and balance on the legislature, and the legislature is continuously trying, very rarely successful, but continuously trying to nibble away at that. And it's a lot like the way executive power increases and legislative power decreases at the national level. These things ebb and flow, and these things, there just has to be some balance. I mean, that really is what it comes down to.
But this isn't balance.
No balance.
I mean, this isn't balance. This is saying the legislature just flat out cannot touch this part of the Constitution. That's not balance. That's prohibition.
As citizens can do what I can do.
Okay, but that's fair.
That's equality.
That's beside the point. We're talking about the institution of the legislature,
not
the people who make not the people who make up the legislature, but the legislature itself. That's what we're talking about. The power of the legislature itself.
The legislature itself is people. So
that's like saying we're going to take powers away from the governor, from the governor's office, and then saying, well, but as a private citizen governor, you can still do this, that, or the other thing. That's beside the point. The governor has powers. The legislature has powers. These powers are assigned to those offices by the Constitution and by statute. They've been there for a long time. And now you're wanting to say, well, this one part, because I'm afraid the people might vote away that I don't like, I don't want to allow the legislature to propose amendments to this one part of the Constitution. That's what you're saying.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think that's unfortunate and a little hypocritical. Tell me a little. I mean, let's talk some specifics. Did you have any backing? I mean, where did this come from? Is there a national campaign or something that's involved in this?
Nope.
Okay.
There's no national group or anything. I mean, this is North Dakota citizens, and I'm sure that the opponents will make claims and throw lies around about who's doing what, but that's just how things go in politics.
Yeah, well, it probably won't be lies. I mean, usually what we see with initiated measure campaigns, do you plan on paying signature collectors?
I don't have any money to do it right now.
Okay, but if you get money, once maybe some of the money starts rolling in, is that on the table?
We'll see.
All right, we'll see. Dustin, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay.
That's it for today's Plain Talk Podcast. Remember, new episodes come out Monday through Friday, right away in the morning. If you're listening to this on a platform that allows you to rate or review the podcast, if you would leave an honest rating and review, I would appreciate it. Every new rating, every new review helps, these different services recommend this podcast to other listeners. So everyone helps a lot. If you wanted to leave me direct feedback, you can email me, rob@sayanythingblog.com. I'm always happy to listen to you, help you if you're having any problems listening to the show. And if you don't like something about the show, I'd like to hear about it. I'm not going to promise you that I'll agree with you or I'll do anything about it, but I'll always listen. Follow me on social media. I'm at Rob Port on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook as well, Rob Port. Say Anything Blog has a Twitter account and a Facebook account. Please follow those as well. And thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. We'll talk again.